Thank you, Donald. Good evening, everybody. I'm sorry we're late. It isn't that Monsieur Barnier's boys have hijacked me and locked me away in a prison in Brussels, much as they would like to, on a day, of course, when Brexit is in the news, mind you, when isn't it? And he presents a new treaty, and my goodness me, aren't the chickens coming home to roost from the deal Mrs May did just before Christmas? She was quite robust in her response in the Commons today, and we're going to hear more from her on Friday. And yet, however important Brexit may be, and gosh, I suppose it is the biggest political change we're likely to see in our lifetimes, I don't think, wherever you are now, you may well be on the M25, you may well have been there for several hours, but wherever you are today, everyone is talking about the weather. And you know what? I'm going to talk about the weather, because this morning I went to catch the first train out of St Pancras, and I simply could not believe the state of the roads in central London. People were slipping and sliding all over the place. Even on big roads like the A4, it was pretty clear to me that there'd been no salt or grit of any kind at all put down. And yet, we've been warned now for 10 days, haven't we? The beast from the east is coming. I mean, it sounds like some extraordinary apocalyptic weather event was about to befall us. And yeah, it has snowed, and in some parts of the country, it's quite deep. And yet, despite the warnings, we appear to be completely incapable of dealing with it. And I want to ask, where were all the gritters? Why can we never, ever get this right? If you agree with me that we appear to be wholly unprepared despite being told the beast was coming, then call me on 0345 6060 973. Or maybe you think I'm completely wrong, and actually our services at every level have done a wonderful job today, in which case text to 84850. Or maybe you think we should be a bit more British, kind of like our grandparents would have been. We should be a bit more stoic and just jolly well get on with it. In which case you can tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC, and watch us on Facebook. We're live from Brussels. And I just look at it all. I mean, 529 schools closed in Kent today. Amber warnings and now red warnings in Scotland, which means potential risk to life and property. I mean, it sounds like something extraordinary has happened. And yet, before Christmas, when they had the polar vortex on the east coast of America, I mean, in Philadelphia, 5 feet of snow fell. And somehow, after 24 hours or so, things appear to get better. Now, I was sort of wondering this morning and teasing just a little bit, and I was saying, well, is the reason that in London we haven't really done very much? Maybe it is that all the London authorities think because of global warming, this will never, ever happen again. And I wonder whether that might provoke a reaction. And sure enough, Caroline Lucas from the Green Party says, a man whose ignorance really knows no bounds. Well, thank you for that. And Deborah Meaden says, what an opportunistic idiot. Well, Deborah, all I can tell you is, Gary Lineker. I love Gary Lineker. We always disagree with everything. What a numpty. You see, if you even dare challenge global warming, even though I was just trying to wind them up, they all go berserk. But on a more serious point, aren't we somewhat hysterical about the weather? Aren't we following the principle of safety first to an almost ludicrous degree? And why is it the authorities simply can't get this right? And I really, honestly, I'd love to know. I mean, we've been chasing Transport for London all day, looking for a reaction. I'm very much hoping that we're going to get one. Why can't we get this right, folks? Or have I got this wrong? Is this what happens in other countries when it snows? Do they completely grind to a halt? And I certainly don't think they do in Scandinavia or in Germany or in countries like that. No, somehow we simply can't cope with the snow. And I want to know why. Why can't we cope? And I'm reminded, certainly once I remember I had to get to London. It was important. And the roads were closed where I lived. So I walked 6 miles down the road in my welly boots to Orpington, dodging the drifts, and eventually a train came along. So let me know. Today, did you get stuck, stranded or cut off just because of the snow? And could the authorities have done more about it? Am I being too critical? 0345 6060 973. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 7:15. On the day that Michel Barnier has done his best to disrupt Mrs May's Brexit plans, some snow falling across the country appears to have stopped virtually everything. Yeah, sure, it's been tough on the roads, but hundreds of schools in counties like Kent alone have been closed. And now in large parts of the country, the advice is don't leave your houses. We've got amber warnings, red warnings, risks to life and property. Now, all I saw was central London today before hopping on the first Eurostar, which got into Brussels. It was 15, 20 minutes late because of a depth of the snow in parts of Kent, but hey, we got here. Are we being, on the one hand, hysterical and over the top, and on the other, frankly, ill-prepared? So I was very critical of the roads in central London this morning, critical of Transport for London. Did ask them to appear on the programme, but they've given us a statement saying, although the majority of our services are running normally, the current freezing temperatures and snowfall are affecting some of our tube, bus and rail services. Our staff are working hard to minimise the impact and have all services back to normal as quickly as possible. I apologise to customers. They should check before they travel. They tell us there were 39 gritters out around in Greater London today. Well, there weren't many in the centre this morning. But let's go. My first caller is Stuart from Edinburgh. Stuart, you are in a red warning area. How is it?
Oh, you beat me to it, Nigel. I was going to say, welcome from the red zone.
yeah, absolutely. So you must be facing some of the worst climatic conditions the world's ever seen, if you believe what we're getting from various media organisations.
Oh, yeah, I mean, we've got a full 4 horsemen of the apocalypse raining over the skies, you know what I mean?
So I presume that everything's closed, there are no shops, no food, no petrol stations. I mean, it must be really bad.
Oh, yeah, I mean... Yeah, that sarcasm aside, it's been bad, but not that bad. I mean, my friends in Canada would still be laughing at this weather.
Yeah, actually, Stuart, I think actually we're being laughed at all over the world. And I'm sure, and they say that in some places there are 50, in the country, there are up to 15 inches of snow, which is 40 centimetres in European. But I mean, how deep is the snow in Edinburgh?
Well, in Edinburgh, I wouldn't say it's that deep, to be honest with you. I mean, it's more just the flurries, and when the snow's sailed because of the high winds, the snow's getting driven up from the ground, so it's creating quite a bit of a haze. So it's a nightmare for driving, but it's not actually that deep.
So, Stuart, have you tried today to continue with your life as normal, or have you listened to the alerts coming out and bolted the door and stayed inside?
Well, to be quite honest, my boss told me that I could go at work at 1 o'clock, so I wasn't waiting for him to think about it twice.
OK, Stuart, thanks very much indeed. Well, there we are, a call from the red zone. Life appears to be continuing. We're going to go to central London, to Michael in Edgware, a new caller to the show. Michael, am I right in my criticism of London's roads first thing this morning?
Nowhere. I don't know where they are. Not a clue. I haven't seen any of them. Go on the motorways, and you've got Highways England, who seem to be doing a far, far better job. I've been up to Manchester and back today.
Have you really?
No problems at all. Not a problem at all.
Goodness me. Good. So you've done a what?
Snowing. Sorry.
So that's like a 500. So that's like 500 miles today, Michael, that you've driven, and honestly, the roads were clear and good. Yeah.
Clear and good. In Cheshire, it was snowing heavily. They had Highways Agency out. Sorry, Highways England nowadays. The Northwest Motorway Police were about. They're helping people. It was just fine. Anyway, 49% of the country, of course, are going to blame something else, probably Brexit. Right.
I do think I'm sure that's got something to do with it. And Michael, so how are the roads in central London now?
Now, well, the side roads are slippery. The main roads are okay, but they promise a lot more snow tomorrow, don't they? So,
they do.
I'm not going to be out on it.
Right. So basically, Highways England 10 out of 10. Transport for London marks out of 10.
Well, 0 really. They haven't done anything.
0. Right. That was Michael. That was my impression. That was my impression. No, thank you for that. Kathleen is calling from Wokingham. Kathleen, are you in a state of panic over this weather?
I'll tell you what, I've not stopped laughing since I had the first 2 callers. I have to say, Nigel, people are snowflakes. Excuse me.
Well, you've beaten me to it, Kathleen. I was saving it. I mean, you're absolutely previous generations just got on with it, and now we're scared of everything, aren't we?
I tell you what, I'm having to stop laughing. The tears are streaming down my face. Look, I'm 81 now. In 1962, we moved from London down to Wokingham in Berkshire, where I am now. We moved 2 days after Christmas, and then it started to snow, and it stayed on the ground, thick snow. It stayed on the ground for 3 months. I had three little children. I was expecting my fourth. I had a pram to take the youngest boy to school, to the school with the other two, and there was a 25-minute walk each way. I'm still
Kathleen,
here.
School? Oh, Kathleen, I'm sorry, Kathleen, I think we're having a bit of a problem here. You said school. No, Kathleen, you don't understand. When it snows, all the schools close down, don't they?
Well, my oldest son called me tonight and said the schools in Fleet have already closed. He's got to take time off work tomorrow.
Oh, dear. And do you remember the... Kathleen, do you remember the winter of 47? That was even more severe, wasn't it?
Yes, I do. I was 11. And I've got a photograph of me and my brother all wrapped up at warm in the snow. Yeah. And I'll tell you what we did as kids. In those days, we used to have milk delivered in milk crates. They were metal milk crates. And my mum lived on a half hill, which went down to a quite steep hill in London. And we got on the milk crates and we went straight down the hills. Where was health and safety in those days? We had such
Sounds good. Well, I have to say, Kathleen, I hope all these kids who've been off school today have been out tobogganing or building snowmen or having fun.
They don't. No.
But I bet they're sitting at home playing on their computers.
They're not allowed to do it without wearing a hard hat.
Kathleen, wonderful phone call. Thank you very much indeed. Keith says by text, he says, I think we're over the top on safety. School never closed when I was a lad. However, it's a fine line really with resources. We can't have too much capital tied up in equipment for a few days a year. Countries like Sweden okay, I get that. Keith, I do understand that is a balance for you. I'm not expecting Transport for London to have hundreds and hundreds of gritters there available. But I do wonder, Keith, given that we were told the beast from the east, it sounds like some apocalyptic Armageddon-style event. I do wonder, given we knew all of this, frankly, where the gritters were. Because I didn't see them, and my friend from Edgware, who phoned earlier, who's driven 500 miles today, praising the way the motorways have been dealt with today in difficult conditions, but it wasn't happening in London. Ian says, Nigel, come on. The issue is not global warming. Even the most ardent supporter is calling it climate change now, as there is no real evidence for global warming, and many scientists suggest we should worry more about global cooling. Man has little effect on the climate compared to the activity of the sun. Well, Ian, if we're going to go on to global warming, I don't know is the answer to that. What I do know is the late, great Sir Patrick Moore, who was a friend and supporter of mine, said to me he was convinced as a scientist that sunspot activity had a much, much bigger effect on temperatures on the planet than any CO2 we were putting into the atmosphere. But, when I put this tweet out at 6 o'clock this morning, saying, is it because they believe in global warming, they've got no grit? I was actually teasing. I've been learning from McDonald. Okay, very good indeed. Anonymous, never mind the weather. What about Major's speech? Yeah, Johnny Major today did give a speech, and it was wholly negative. He said, we can't do this, and we can't do that, and we can't do the other, and we can't expect to get a bespoke deal. And I have to say, John Major is the reason I left the Conservative Party. John Major is the reason that I was there at the start and helped to form UKIP. And 25 years on, he's being just as negative. But can't you see, Anonymous, that it's all concerted and coordinated? Labour announcing their customs union 2 days ago. And today in the Parliament, guess who's here today? Tony Blair. Oh, yes, Tony Blair's here today. Sir Keir Starmer's here today. The establishment are colluding and doing their best to try and stop Brexit. And May, on Friday, needs to pull out the speech of her life. David is calling from Fife, a new caller from the Red Zone. Good evening, David.
Nigel, good evening. It's a pleasure to speak to you.
How are things in Fife, David?
Do you know something? I left at 3:30 this morning. I'm a fish merchant, and I've been across to Glasgow, and I've been there all day, and I'm on my way home just now. So,
no, that's not possible, David. That's not possible, David. It's a red zone. You're living in a red zone.
I've been everywhere. This isn't London. This is not the snowflake society up here.
And David, how's it? I mean, has it been? I mean, I guess it's been slow travelling around. But what you're saying is, life in your part of Scotland is still going on.
It is still going on, but I want to ask you about the gritters. I want to know where all the grit is, because I've seen this morning I did 90 miles and I passed 2 gritters, not anything coming out the back of them. And
really,
I've seen countless gritters today, and there's hardly any grit. So I'd like you to ask Miss Sturgeon that there's a hellish job up here. I don't have any time for. Where is all the grit?
Well, do you remember a few years ago, David, there was a big winter and a lot of councils stocked up on huge amounts of grit and salt and then didn't really use it for a couple of years.
Yes.
So I just wonder whether councils have been saying, well, hang on, we need to be proportionate about this. It doesn't snow that often. Maybe, and I was teasing about global warming, but maybe in London and elsewhere, we just haven't got the stocks we need to deal with heavy snow.
I don't think there's any grit anywhere. I honestly don't, Nigel. I think it's terrible. The roads are shocking. The roads are going to be ice tomorrow. I would not advise anyone to go at night. The roads.
No.
Definitely not, because all they're doing is ploughing it and there's no grit coming out the back. I followed 2 gritters side by side and they were ploughing and not one bit of grit coming out the back. So I don't think there's any grit.
Right, David, thank you for your call. And David saying there's no grit, there's no salt, and tomorrow it's going to be absolutely awful. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's now 7:30. You're all talking snow, you're all talking disruption as the beast from the east descends upon the country, and yet despite 10 days' worth of warning, it would appear that in central London, gritters were a rare sight indeed. Before the break, I was asked about John Major's speech today. So, big speech from John Major about Brexit, following on a couple of days, as I say, from Corbyn's speech on the customs union, and indeed Tony Blair in town today, pressure being piled on Britain. Indeed, we had Mr Timmermans, who's Juncker's deputy, giving a big speech in the Parliament today, saying you can always change your minds, and a little bit more of that later on the show. But let's just listen to some of John Major's tone today.
We simply cannot move forward with leaving the European Union, the single market, the customs union and the European Court of Justice, whilst at the same time demanding an à la carte, beneficial to Britain, bespoke entrance to the European market. It is simply not a credible negotiating position. A willingness to compromise is essential. If either side, the United Kingdom or the European Union, both sides, either side, if either side is too inflexible, too unbending, too wedded to what they won't do rather than what they could do, then the negotiations will fail.
Can't, won't, it's impossible. We can't have this and we can't have that. And he said in other parts of his speech, we can't have a Ukrainian deal and we can't have a Turkish and Norwegian deal. Negative, 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 negative. Compromise, Sir John Major. I mean, she virtually gave the country away before Christmas in an attempt to keep her party together and to try and get the thing to move on. No, I'm sorry, John Major is wrong. Look, we are a great country. We have voted for Brexit because we believe in governing our own country and making our own way in the world. That about can't, John Major. The word we need is can. We can do whatever we want. Now, Barnier, as I say, in many ways, has behaved predictably today. And the biggest problem, I think, of all, and there are many, but the biggest problem of all is he's basically saying that Northern Ireland has to stay in the customs union, has to stay in full regulatory alignment, has to stay with a system where the European Court of Justice is the ultimate arbiter of how they can live in that country. And all of this has to happen. Otherwise, there'd have to be a hard border, and that would damage the Belfast Agreement and all be a disaster. Funny, isn't it? Because I got a document here. It's a European Parliament document from their Constitutional Affairs Committee, published last year. It's entitled Smart Border 2, Avoiding a Hard Border on the Island of Ireland for Customs Control and the Free Movement of Persons. And it shows how, with modern technology, All of this could be dealt with. So why is it suddenly such a problem? Well, it's because actually the people who are putting up the Irish problem, talking about the hard border, are the European negotiators themselves. They're making life as difficult as they possibly can. Mrs May was robust today in her response. She did say the draft legal text that the Commission has published would, if implemented, undermine the UK common market, threaten the constitutional integrity of the UK by creating a customs union regulatory border down the Irish Sea. And no UK Prime Minister could ever agree to it. Yes, Prime Minister, I agree. And what will we get on Friday when she speaks? Will we get the Lancaster House speech, the one that I applauded, cheered on this programme to the rooftops? Or will we get Florence, where she says we love everything in the European Union, and whilst we're leaving, we'll basically rejoin all of it? I think the time has come for Mrs May, frankly, to call not just their bluff in Brussels, but many of those in her own party. The time for strong leadership on this is now. And Barnier did say that everything he'd put in this 120-page draft treaty today, that all of it was their backstop position, but if the British could make a better offer, they could actually come to a better deal. So a bit of strength, we'll get a better deal. Now back to the snow, back to amber zones, red zones, schools closing, the beast from the east, and yet no gritters in London. Roy is calling from Stevenage, a new caller to the show. Good evening, Roy.
Good evening, Nigel. Yeah, I was laughing along with the lady previous about how soft we've become. I just wondered if you'd seen the headmaster with Piers Morgan the other morning. He's actually banned children from touching the snow. Not only not throwing snowballs, but actually touching the snow, because he's frightened that there might be a claim that should the children get a bit of grit in their eye from a snowball fight. Where the hell? Where are we going with this? It's mad.
It's regulation, safety, and of course the worry of being sued. And you can't touch the snow, but you will turn into a snowflake. Roy, I'm with you. I think we're completely over the top. I think we do need to be a bit more stoic and get on with it. But I'm still going to say, despite the fact that's how I feel, I'm still going to be critical of Transport for London, because I do think, given the huge amount of warning they had, they could have done better this morning,
Nigel, do you know if the likes of Hertfordshire don't have much snow and Kent are having a real time of it, do they actually share resources? Do they actually send the gritters, which are sitting around waiting for snow in Hertfordshire, down to help out Kent? Do they do that?
Well, I don't think they do, but please somebody tell me that's wrong. Tell me that county councils and unitary authorities cooperate. I guess the problem is that, well, do you know what? We'll send the gritters, and that'll be good, and then we'll send the bill, and they might not pay. But if someone, I tell you what, Roy, if someone knows the answer to Roy's question, call 0345 6060 973. Don't know, Roy, but hey, you've set a hair running. We'll find out. I thank you. I'm going to Blackpool, and not just Blackpool tonight. I'm supposed to be in Blackpool tomorrow night on Question Time. So, Andrew, a new caller to the show, is Question Time going to be on in Blackpool tomorrow night, in your view, Andrew?
Oh, Nigel, good evening. It's such a pleasure to speak to you. I actually, I'm a first-time caller. I was telling your colleague, I just pulled into Chorley Services on the M6. What I wanted to say was about your point about people not being able to plan. 5 hours ago, I was in the red zone. I was due to fly from Edinburgh back to Birmingham Airport, and the gate was called. The airline this morning had said all flights will be going today. We've got no plans for cancellation. And then at 3 o'clock, they suddenly cancelled every flight to and from Scotland for the rest of the day. Now,
and was that, in your view, Andrew, was that justifiable, or did it look over the top?
Well, to be fair, it's been a tough day, in Edinburgh.
Yeah.
Somebody who doesn't live in Scotland. It seemed quite tough in terms of, but planes were taking off and landing, Nigel, and the transatlantic planes from Edinburgh were still going. So I was left in a situation where, because the airline couldn't say, well, we don't know when we're going to fly again, I was left in a situation where you either have to jump on a train or do what I've ended up doing and hire a car. and drive 300 miles. So,
and that's what you've done.
That's what I've done, but I just think the forward planning should have been there because, like you rightly say, this hasn't come out of the blue.
No. The beast from the east. I've never known a weather event to be more publicised than this. Andrew, I thank you very much indeed. Andrew from Blackpool, though, at Chorley Services right now. And I'm going to be in Blackpool tomorrow night. In fact, I'm going to be broadcasting on LBC from 6 till 8 tomorrow evening. So I've got an hour off Ian Dale from 6 till 7. He's got another event to go to. In fact, big global awards that are taking place tomorrow night. And then after 8 o'clock, I'll be going off to do Question Time, which I haven't been on for about 16 months. That's if we get there. So we'll just have to wait and see tomorrow. Kathy says, Nigel, I don't agree with all this health and safety, but I will say, I think there is such a thing as global warming. You can't keep polluting the atmosphere and expect no problems. Kathy, there may be, there may not be, but right now we have snow. Sheila says, Nigel, here in Carn, Wiltshire, our roads are all well gritted. Problem is, we have no snow or ice, says Sheila. Nigel, if you can make it to Blackpool tomorrow, give the Ramonas hell on Question Time. Disappointed about Question Time tomorrow because it was pre-advertised a couple of weeks ago by Dimbleby. And Diane Abbott was going to be on the programme with me and Ken Clark. That was what we knew. And I've now heard that Diane Abbott has pulled out, which I have to say, somewhat disappointed by. Jackie says, what a nanny state we now live in. In 1963, we all walked to school in weather when there was 3 foot of snow. No snowflakes around then. Matt says, I'm working 6 hours later tonight outside a nightclub in the freezing cold, but I'm English and my grandparents taught me to brush it off and get on with it. Matt, I have to say, I think being a doorman on a nightclub tonight does not sound like a whole barrel of fun. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusive in LBC. It's 7:45. Well, it was bitterly cold in Brussels today, but no snow, I'm pleased to say, and the European Parliament was in session. A big debate about Poland. They're about to apply Article 7 of a treaties to Poland, which means that Poland will be stripped of its voting rights. Why? Because they don't like the changes that are being put in place with the judiciary in Poland. They think it's wrong. So I did my bit and I said, the Poles are very resilient people. After all, Lech Walesa, Solidarity helped really in many ways to bring down Soviet communism. I suggested perhaps they might do the same again to the European Union. Well, got to tell you that Mr. Juncker's right-hand man, Commissioner Frans Timmermans, didn't like it much.
Do the Polish people understand that Mr. Farage's best friend is Vladimir Putin?
Nonsense.
Do the Polish people know that?
Unbelievable.
Do the Polish people know that in Mr. Farage's view, yes. When somebody says something you don't like, you just try to prevent them to say it, don't you?
Rubbish. And you know.
You admire Vladimir Vladimirovich.
You must be very scared, Commissioner. That's all I can say.
I'm not. Well, yes, I'm shaking in my boots because I'm next to you.
You must. Well, that was the European Parliament today. They didn't like it very much, and it's unusual to have that sort of to and fro take place in this Parliament, really. But hey, there we are. But, watch it because, as I say, Poland's about to have voting rights removed. Hungary is being taken to the European Court. It is not just the Brits that are having problems with Brussels. Tim says on Facebook, why can't we loan the equipment from Sweden or countries who are kitted out for bad weather? Because, Tim, they get the bad weather at pretty much the same kind of time that we get the bad weather. Shaz says, question, wouldn't we be able to have our cake and eat it if Northern Ireland was in the customs union? Well, Shaz, it's a very interesting question. If we just ditched Northern Ireland, if we just said, right, you're effectively going to stay part of the European single market, but really be leaving the British single market, and you'll have a different constitutional setup. I mean, you can't do that without damaging the integrity of the United Kingdom. Now, this is something, of course, that Sinn Féin and others will be pushing and campaigning for very, very hard. There are some, like Sinn Féin, who want to use what the Commission have said over a potential hard border, for which there's absolutely no need at all, and they're doing it to try actually and break up the United Kingdom, and we shouldn't, in my view, play their game. Simon is calling from Bolton. Good evening, Simon.
Hey, Nigel. We spoke last year when you were having the debate about if people knew what they were voting for. So we have.
Right. Okay. Well, Good
evening.
Good to speak to you again, Simon. And I'm just kind of saying that we have all this hysteria, and we're warned what's going to happen. And when it does happen, it seems I'm not sure we're coping that well with it, or are we? Are we defying them?
Well, the company I used to work for many years ago, I used to run the winter gritting in Liverpool, and manage all the trucks and this, that and the other. And basically what you used to do in an afternoon is you go onto the computer and they had all this model software on there where you could see what the weather was doing, the temperatures. And then you'd have all the lads on standby, and of course you had to pay them while they weren't at work, because obviously they couldn't go out drinking if they got to get called in on an emergency. And we used to grit all the roads in the city centre, out on the motorways, and kept them running. But the thing is, what kind of makes me laugh is when I was at junior school in Birmingham, we used to have snow, and I mean, I'm 60 now. We used to have snow. We have had snow when it's been 4 foot high. We used to walk to school. We used to walk to school, go to school, have our little bottle of milk, and then the headmaster would send us all out, and we'd clear footpaths on the playground so that people could walk in no problem. There was no issues with snowballs and all this malarkey, and I can't understand. I mean, it's like they've cancelled trains in areas where they don't need to. And this morning on Nick's show, the people that were ringing in about the state of London, it was absolutely horrendous, and I can't wait to see what Mr. O'Brien's best buddy says tomorrow morning.
Well, quite. Well, Simon, that's why I got that hair running at 6 o'clock this morning, because I simply couldn't believe the state of side roads. I get it, but I couldn't believe the state of the major roads in London this morning. It was quite extraordinary. Simon, I'm with you completely. And Sadiq Khan will be taking your calls with James O'Brien tomorrow morning from 10 o'clock. So that's going to be good. Simon, I thank you. And by the way, if you're confused about the green, amber and red signals, and particularly if you're living in a red zone, you best find out. lbc.co.uk has got all of those explanations. On Twitter, Kay says, global warming is about erratic weather conditions like this because of the extra heat and moisture it generates in the atmosphere. We're not going to argue about global warming. I was just teasing. That was all. Dudley says, the only grit that matters is the grit of our cabinet to secure a good Brexit. Very hard to get away from Brexit, whatever you do. Adrian is in Luton and a new caller to the show. Good evening, Adrian.
Good evening, Nigel. What I'd like to
Good
say,
evening.
Nigel, I travelled down to London this morning at 4:30 down the M1 motorway. I did get held up for 3 hours because of an accident. But I've got to agree with you, when I got into London, none of the roads have been gritted, side roads or major roads. And it took me over 2.5 hours just to get into the central of London. I'm just on my way back home now because it's took me that time to do my work. I travel to Bulgaria regularly and the Czech Republic, and they have severe snow. And there is never any hold-ups in them two countries.
I think, I've been in France when it snowed, and maybe the first few hours there's a bit of chaos, and then they sort it out. But you were literally crawling through London today, were you?
Yeah, Nigel, it was just at a standstill. And I'm just surprised, a major city in the UK, and there was no grit.
I just think
even lorries were sliding. And I was just
I think TfL have got this completely and utterly wrong. They totally got it wrong. I teased them. Was it because they believed in global warming? They didn't have enough grit. And hopefully Sadiq Khan will answer that question on LBC tomorrow morning. But Adrian, you're absolutely backing up what I said. I agree with you. There are unforeseen circumstances where you can't blame the authorities if something happens. But this was absolutely foreseen. And by the way, Adrian, how was the M1?
The M1's fine, Nigel. It's clear. I'm travelling home at the moment now, back to Derby. And the roads are fine. The motorways are running quite good. But you would just think when you get into a major city that the roads would have been gritted, and they weren't at all.
Yeah, why can't we cope? Adrian, thank you. I'm going to go to Aidan in Tottenham, another new caller. Aidan in central London. Are my criticisms right about the roads?
Yes, Nigel, you are. My mother was born in 1929, evacuated for a month at the beginning of 1940. And between July and September 1940, the Germans bombed London every night for 56 nights. once was her primary school closed in those 56 nights. Not once was her secondary school closed in those 56 nights. And she would have to clamber over burnt-out rubble buildings to get to school. And all I'm saying is I think the overreaction by some companies in cancelling trains before there's even been any snow is just a complete overreaction. And I do hope that the silent majority who voted for Brexit will just get on and do things as they always have done. And I think the British people will just do it. I can't stand these overpaid presenters, people on the BBC, talking rubbish about everything, when in fact most people are very sensible, and I hope Theresa...
Oh, Aidan, I heard them. On the weather, I heard someone on the BBC yesterday saying that if you're going outside, please wear some warm clothes. Well, I'd never have thought of that, would you?
Well, they pay
it's just bizarre.
a year, you know?
It's just bizarre. The whole thing is just bizarre. No, Aidan, I'm with you completely. Thank you. And I've got time for one last call. Kasif, who's calling from Batley. Good evening.
Hello, Nigel. It's quite simple. It's when it snows, it causes such disruption is because people have to drive to work. I mean, 20, 30 years ago, it used to snow 2-3 feet of snow, but the teachers used to put on their wellies and used to walk to school because there was a community spirit. Now you have teachers have to drive 50, 60 miles to get to the schools. And I mean, I think that needs to change.
Yeah, no, do you know what? You're probably right. We probably all do travel further than we ever used to, and there are more of us doing it, and that does contribute to it. Kasif, I agree with you. You're right. It's a fair point. A lot more pressure on our public services in every way. So coping with snow is now a generational thing. It's snowballs versus snowflakes is how it would appear. Perhaps I'm being cruel. I did read an amazing story once in the late 18th century in North Norfolk. There was a huge blizzard overnight, and the only one young boy, made it into his primary school to sign his name in the register, and his name was Horatio Nelson. And I just think, okay, I'm not asking people to do stupid things, and it is going to freeze like crazy overnight, and there will be a lot of very, very dangerous roads out there all over the UK tomorrow morning, so please be careful. But hey, closing down schools by the thousand, reacting the way we are, is completely and utterly over the top. You've been listening to The Nigel Farage Show, live from Brussels. I'm back tomorrow night, I'm hoping, from Blackpool. We'll have to see how that goes. Coming up at 10 o'clock tonight, it's Ian Collins, but up next, it's Clive Bull.
Nigel, thank you.